then I will make something, slightly more human, something like, going a few steps ahead and even go as far as taking her hands and say, we can give it, we can try this. I understand your concern for your tribe. And what I'm saying is that I'm not giving up on this thing until we solved the problem. I did bring the sands away. I'm responsible. I'm not running away from that.
Is this a good time for Hod to, come within speaking distance?
Yeah, it is.
Well, actually, that's the joke being that, he does. And the sort of implied position of his body is this a good time? So he comes forward to both of you and says, I don't understand. Are we going? And he looks around a little bit and says, I think now is when I will say that we've been lucky. Now we should press on. There are communities along the river where we can get a real rest.
Ray stand up, and I think standing up is a painful enough process for me to sell that idea. And I tell him, I think we are good to go, but you have been in the village, you've seen what happened, and we need to I wanted to make sure that she can help us if that happens again. Last thing we want is to bring trouble to your master.
He says, I'm planning on being a little cautious about walking in anywhere with what may be a focus for, spirit forces.
I want to try.
He says, I get it. I definitely agree. If, and he turns to you and he uses the word for shaman, if a shaman, he uses the duster word, would be so, would choose, to help. He says, I can only be grateful. And besides, and here he kind of, smiles in a sort of unpleasant way. Besides, he says, these would be heavy to carry alone. The implication being that, if you two prove troublesome, he doesn't care which one of you dies or both. So you would even possibly help it along if necessary. I mean, after all, he could just go back by himself. Maybe. It'd be a lot easier with someone else's help. So, I'll tell you what, just because I'm playing this guy, I'll tell you a little bit of his internal state when he was over there thinking. He was saying, would Sasiva be happy if I just brought back one very transportable small pouch of this sand just to say that, okay, the plan was good and this is our indicator. Now let's, if you want to do it again, but that guy you sent, that didn't work out. He was kind of contemplating plan B over there and was thinking,
Since this makes a lot of sense to me, what I'm trying to do in the conversation is kind of use my monster knowledge. I don't know how well versed he is in that. Try to use that in the conversation too.
What, you mean roll it now?
I mean, I'm not using it to understand things, but just, bringing it into conversation to give the idea that we need a shaman in case things turn south, and see if he can be persuaded. I mean, it sounds like he is in a way. So what I'm saying is that I tell him, the last thing I tell him is, the best thing we can do now is find some small safe spot we can get a rest. before
Okay.
we move.
So the three of you, I think, are able to do that if Athasha is willing. And I'm willing to play out any decision anyone makes. But if this is at least possible, um, at least for now, then we can shift the three of you to the river and along those routes, which would move from the photograph that I provided of the river and with very little travel to an area that looks more inhabited like the other picture.
Yeah, it's
Now,
fine by me, but
maybe
it's
not as
Athasha,
built up.
so
Maybe not as built up as that one picture with the people walking by the river. Not quite as built up as that, but another day's travel, and that's what it would look like from where you are. And the small village that I provided would be, that kind of environment. I assume that this is fairly new to Ithasha. I mean, you know that there's the Great River. You know that there are humans along it, and no Duster tribe is completely absent all contact with human culture. That's even the ant people have seen a human before. But the but here, of course, you're in a whole nest of them, and the first thing that I'm thinking would probably strike you, and you can tell me too, is just how much impact on the environment they have. The roadways, the occasional alterations or reinforcements of small sections, um, the fact that they do, if there's a human habitation, it's a building. If there's, there are secondary buildings, there are corrals, there are spots along the river, either very basic, but here and there more sophisticated, for boats to stop. In this area, no ships, but certainly barges, long cargo boats. In it further downriver, probably not yet. There will be places where a team of horses couldn't drag the barge from the shore. So that's the thing that strikes me that a duster from your area wouldn't be familiar with, is just even the beginnings, which to a human would seem very, very basic, very minimal. The beginnings of such alterations of the environment would seem a very extreme to a duster from your background. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm more or less horrified, but I'm not going to show it. I start to realize how little the things I care for are compared with the scale of this.
Perhaps, although in those terms, in cultural terms, perhaps, but on the other hand, to your people, 1,000 years is just a few lifetimes. And the expanse of territory that you simply call home is immense. So I'm just thinking, as a person at the table. But to Athasha at the moment, right? At Athasha at the moment, I can see that.
It.
Right.
So I'm like,
yeah.
Is this really going to be here for good?
Right. Right.
They certainly try to make it that way.
Right.
That's obvious.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's an important point. So the three of you can proceed to such a community, and it's swiftly clear that given given the right behavior and given the right signs meaning perhaps Hod reaches in under one of those leather bracers and pulls out a very folded, very used piece of parchment and shows this is who I work for. This is my little passport around here. Something like that. So it's not as though you have to pay with coins or anything. It's more a matter of showing, that letter. And then Hod actually also asks somebody to carry word further downriver so that people who work with him can meet him. So he says, we'll be met by some people who will take us on a boat, and we'll be back, in a day or so.
I don't want to be that guy, but I'm also going to take some precaution to make sure that Natasha is dressed.
Oh,
when we get the human people.
Okay.
I will explain
as I recall,
that
she does have a cape that she likes to wear, so that's probably true.
Just making sure that
my take is that the occasional, to use the improper term, the occasional barbaric duster does show up around here. And everybody is at least, okay. I get it. So
I
it's
am
not
dressed.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yes. Now, so I'm not necessarily feeling like playing all the people that you would meet and so on, but to actually eat, a hot meal that was cooked in a pot for more than 15 minutes, and to actually, I hate the convention of inns and taverns, which is so fucking 19th century, right? I hate that. So there aren't any. But that doesn't mean that this is a traveling community, and a place, a community with people who pass through. And so the concept that there are buildings that have not much in them except a bunch of beds, that's fine. People, the only real question is whether you shake out all the bed bugs, and stuff like that. And the bed bugs, whatever. Just make sure that
I don't need a bed.
Yeah, no, true. Okay. So,
I certainly don't need bugs.
Right. So, no, I know you don't need a bed, but the humans will go and probably look suspiciously at the beds to make sure that somebody put them out in the sun, at least recently. That's, it's not a matter of paying for those or anything. This is just a part of the functions of the community to have this sort of thing. Farith, you're fully aware that since you're riding on Hod's credit, and since Hod is working off of just reputation and obligation, without any personal connection here, like a cousin or a coworker or something, that means that you guys owe these people. So, there should be a favor coming back, whether it is an anonymous form like coinage or whether it's a specific favor. The people you're talking to are well aware that if they're nice to you guys, and if you're as important as Hod seems to say he is, then there's going to be something coming back to this community, in due time.
Well, in the time before we go to bed, I take a moment to look around and see if there is anything my competencies can apply that I may do to.
Can you be more specific?
Maybe there is something I can do with my skills that I'm looking for. If I see anybody who is doing any kind of job that I may help.
Pick a skill.
Just to. Well, I think writing is not particularly interesting. I can draw, paint. I can blacksmith, glass blowing. Yeah, that's pretty much my work.
I think glass blowing would be either blacksmithing or glass blowing, but especially glass blowing would be well worth it.
Yeah.
If you want to.
So
right.
I don't think there is the time to do it now, but I can, make promises to take